I'm going to be very brief, well, very brief. I'm going to try and be very brief. I'm not a very talkative person by nature, and I'm very shy. So I want to start by saying thank you everybody for coming back, because I can imagine you're exhausted. I know I am, so I really appreciate that you're here. I want to thank Nuqat for inviting me, and it's really very interesting to be in Kuwait. This is off topic, but I feel I have to say it because I'm a visual person, so my reaction to a place is always very visual. And my first reaction to Kuwait was, all the women are gorgeous. So thank you for introducing me to something I had not anticipated. Everybody says all Lebanese women are beautiful. Nonsense. Kuwaitis are better. Okay. So please. We have to clap for Kuwaitis. I'm sorry for the Lebanese. I'm sorry. I'm Lebanese myself, I can say that. Okay. I'm going to talk about, actually, in English, because I'm talking about international collaborations, and intercultural and interdisciplinary and inter-ego. So I named my lecture, I titled my lecture, Uncommon Common Grounds. And the story is this. In 2004, I started the Nuqat Foundation, and the whole purpose of the foundation was to do research on a field that needed really help, which is Arabic typography. There were lots of fonts, obviously, there was shortage of fonts, but certainly shortage of quality fonts. And this was sort of my background. I mean, the explanation and the introduction explains it. I'm very interested in typography. That's my research. I was teaching. I was frustrated as a designer because I'm also a book designer, and book design is kind of all about typography. And so if you don't have the right ingredients, you can't make the right meal. So it was always really frustrating. So I started a research trying to figure out why we don't have enough fonts, and this ended up in a series of books. But you open something and you discover you have to do a lot more. And the more you do research, the more you find you need more. So this is how the foundation began. And I was lucky to be sort of living between Holland and Dubai at the time. So I could start a foundation in Holland and still live in Dubai. So it was kind of, and this is a bit a description of my life. I'm kind of nomadic. I haven't stayed in one place until Dubai, actually, funny enough. For more than 3 years. So this kind of nomadic life has, for me, gave me the feeling that actually we have, as human beings, a lot more in common than we have differences. And our differences are interesting differences and can be very creative source of inspiration and source of work. So we started this project I had this idea that, okay, I would like to select 5 of my favorite Dutch designers, and then try and find somebody in the Arab world who can work with them in developing a compatible Arabic version of their typeface. And the idea of the project was really also to encourage this kind of line of typography, of really making fonts that work in both languages, because we often, as designers in the Middle East, we design with both languages. And also as a sort of learning process, because there was, and still to a big extent is still lacking, is a professional education in type design, which is a very different skill than just graphic design. So we made this project. I will keep it really short and I will explain. I wanted to focus in this presentation not so much about the projects. I don't want to describe them, but I want to describe the process. So it's a bit chaotic, and I hope you can bear with me. When we launched this project, which was very interesting, I actually stole the name of this presentation from this book that was called Uncommon Ground. And I took the freedom to do that because the editor was a friend of mine, so it's always good to steal from friends, rather than stealing from strangers. They're willing to forgive you. But their book came out at the same time as when we did the project. It took 2 years of going back and forth between designers, developing their typefaces. We had a couple of workshops, talked about what they were doing, had discussions, and then the process was so beautiful, we decided to document it and make a book out of it. And until the very end, we didn't have a name for the project. And then the publisher said, I wasn't publishing the book then, so the publisher said, well, I need a cover, and I had to like struggle one day and just kind of not go to work and sit and like wreck my brains and thinking, what can we call this book? What do you say? You know, how do you describe this process? And so matchmaking was my blah word, but it stuck. It made an impression. It was kind of also nice because it's really about matching to cultures, matching to disciplines, matching to languages, matching people that don't know each other. So you set them up together, and then they become either good friends or not, which is also always, somebody mentioned it before with collaborations. You never know how it's going to go. And sort of like I felt it was kind of fun being a matchmaker. So I matched 10 designers in 5 teams. And so this book came out at the same time. And what I tried to do in this presentation is actually to look at this uncommon process of actually collaborating on a type design. A type design is often a very solitary process. It's very detailed. It's not about big ideas. So it's really difficult to collaborate, and it's very difficult to agree on things. And so you're already putting an unusual process, and then you want to bring people to look at scripts that are not common, that have little in common actually, and try to find commonalities between them. So it's not about negotiation, but it's about using this uncomfortable, this constantly being questioning your comfort, your knowledge, what you expect, what should you do and not do, not having any, especially in Arabic, not having really clear rules of what you can, how far you can get away with, what can you get away with. And then still find common grounds and say, well, do these scripts, can we make them work together? So it's about, so I'll read this quote from this book, from the editor, from my friend David. It said, collaborative practice not only extends its reach across all disciplines, but across whole sectors and levels in society. There is a gathering recognition that we are witnessing the rise of an era of multi-dimensional collaboration, leading to significant innovation and commercial advantage, embodying a powerful transformation in our ways of producing, consuming, relating to one another and to our world. This was in 2007, and it hasn't changed. I mean, this still holds true to this day, and certainly from what I hear from this conference, it really is also urgent in this region. So, what was our uncommon ground? We wanted, the uncommon ground in general is a meeting place between extremes. And so we are talking about extremes in many ways. This project, you have to remember, it was in 2007, so there was already this big divide between, east, west, south, north, whatever, east, west, north, east, south, whatever. So there was a political divide. There was, so there was an ideological reason to do this. It's not my intention. It was never political, but you can't avoid the connotations, the political connotations. On another level, it was also a physical combination of extremes. So you have 2 scripts that are written from opposite directions, so they're facing each other. It's kind of, symbolic, like they're facing each other, and maybe they're not so nice to each other. So we were trying to break the ice in a way, to bring these scripts together. And one of the things in a collaboration, a creative collaboration, is that there's a process of recognition. There's an awareness of uncommon ground. And this is an awareness of all the possible relations across differences. So you recognize the differences and you try to find relations between these differences. And so when you're talking in terms of typography, physically you're looking at how do you bring them together in size, in color, in details, in what is there and what is not there, so the positive and the negative spaces. And also there's an ideological matching of these scripts. What were their function? What was the tools they were written in? So for example, you might decide that the common ground between these 2 scripts can be just the way they were written and the tool they were using. But also, this project became more than just making a typeface, because when you make a typeface and you're making a project that you want to make a fuss about, you have to do something more. So you have to include a bigger dimension. You have to include, you have to put it into the test. You know, you don't make fonts for their prettiness. They have to work in some ways. So for launching the project, we end up as Nuqat Foundation teaming up with another institution with another cultural foundation in Amsterdam called Mediamatic. And we basically used these funds to create an exhibition that was not exactly an exhibition, but I will go through that. So the first things we did in breaking this uncommon ground, is to actually collaborate, bring people from different backgrounds, in Amsterdam, from different backgrounds, from different professional backgrounds, and to work together into designing this exhibition. So the design of the exhibition conceptually was also a collaborative process. And the teams were not really steady, so there was also a breaking, you know, the boundary dynamics of saying, okay, how do you go about exhibiting this work? So we were playing with you know, cultural icons that are Arab and then, or Dutch, and then mixing them together and producing products. So we made a kind of, we Arabized a shop, but it wasn't really a shop. So again, playing with disciplines, you know, you walk into an exhibition, it's actually a shop, and the idea of it was that it's normally an exhibition, you walk in, you look at things, and you go, maybe if you're rich, you buy a piece of art and you leave. And what we wanted to do was actually bring Arabic to, or a hostile environment, or an environment that looked at Arabic script as something dangerous. We're talking 2007. It is not so bad anymore, at least not in Amsterdam. But with this exhibition, it was interesting because the idea was that people can go in and buy a T-shirt, and they did. And the idea was to bring, you know, the conversation outside of the gallery, and to bring the conversation into people's homes, and that people would wear the T-shirt and walk into a shop, a Turkish shop, and they would start to have a conversation that they never had before. So of course, you know, we did it at the time. We were lucky to have it happening at a time when there was not very much news. It was in the summer, so we got a lot of attention. Newspapers, I mean, nobody ever publishes in the newspaper about a typography project, but we did. I mean, they did. We got that attention. So the idea of it was also, with the collaboration, is that you don't want it to be just about people that are working together that benefit from it. You want this to spread that knowledge and make it go further than yourself and further than the project, hopefully. And so this attention that we got in Holland for the project, for the presentation, was of course a kind of political direction. But what happened in the Middle East was far more interesting, because the book was bought. And with the book came the fonts, and people used them a lot. And so you had a real impact in a complete different way, a very more subtle way, because everybody was using it, from websites to big institutions, ordinary people, students. So it went viral, actually. And that success is led to the people that funded it in the first place were, since we talk about funding in this presentation, we as well mention it. It was funded by a fund in Amsterdam for design and culture. It's art, design, and culture. And the first time they gave us money, it was kind of leftover money. They didn't know what to do with it, and so they said, okay, here's a little bit of money. And then we made such a fuss, you know, we got a lot of attention, media attention, that is normally doesn't happen. So the second time they said, can you please do the project again? Now, it's very risky, because, you know, one success does not mean that the second time it would be a success. So I had to kind of think about, okay, why would we do it again? And what do we do the next time? You can't repeat the project. So I decided that maybe it was time to talk about, you know, typography in the built environment, and to explore, go more experimental. So we had bigger budgets, and that allowed us to play a little bit more. And part of the experiment was to actually not just collaborate from a distance and be theoretical. So the team got bigger. We had product designers, architects, and type designers and graphic designers working together, and sometimes the mix was more successful than others, but it was also still a whole team together. That was the nice thing about the project, is that we had the chance to meet more often. And then the idea was to take trips and to go, to take everybody to Dubai, to say, okay, this is a sort of modern Arab city, to take people to Amsterdam, say this is a European city. And to kind of try to see also what it means, what is the difference between these cities, and what are the similarities? How do they use type in their environment? This is a very nice quote that I thought was interesting, and I'm just going to use it as a structure, so it's not my text. Creativity is the generation of new ideas or new ways of looking. Innovation, the successful exploitation of these new ideas, and design is the link between the two. So creativity and new ways of looking, you go in this project to other places, you look at things for the first time, and you look at them differently, even if you've seen them before. So this looks like very ordinary stuff that you see on the street. Creativity is also the generation of new ideas. You sketch things, you play, you experiment with different ways of writing. You might be sitting having a coffee or a drink, and then you scribble on a coaster. You have a nice little notebook. So it's an ongoing process that you constantly think about. How do you generate new ideas? Creativity is also looking at new ways of making things. So normally when you sketch, especially in type, for people that work with typography or type design, you start by drawing by hand normally, or with a brush or whatever. So what does it mean if you're trying to do things that are by intention three-dimensional? Should you sketch also by, putting sand and wax in the sand and like casting letters, cutting them out of things? So the sketching process can be challenged. Creativity can be also coincidental, that you're thinking, how do I have an idea, what do I want to do, and then all of a sudden you have a plate full of pasta and you think, hey, I can still find letters in there by coincidence. You didn't draw them, you didn't make them. And that starts, that process starts you to think about, okay, now how do I make pasta, but actually I actually can design it. And then, then you start bending metal, which is one of the teams, and then you try to later on, we'll talk about what you go further. And the innovation is to think, okay, you've sketched, you've done all these unusual processes, and then now you're going to think of like, okay, why am I doing this? I mean, how do I put it into practice? How do I exploit this idea? What can it be? Can a type be something that you use as template for other things? Can it be, movable for dynamic presentations, for dynamic text? Can it be actually a space that you walk and climb and play with? And then when you finally say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to actually make it. Now I'm going to start designing. Then you start to think about, okay, now I'm going to refine the details and actually put it to practice. So you have two scripts in different cities, and you try to explore them. Like, what happens when you put Arabic in Amsterdam, and when you put Latin in the Arab world? It's not very exciting, is it? Okay, nothing happens. But what happens when you put it in a metro, and not the kind of script you expect to see in a metro, or when you make it into an art installation where people are forced to sit in the same shelter and actually read poetry in each other's languages and have a conversation. So you start to build scenarios that are pushing this idea of creativity further. What happens when you can play with the elements, when your font can become concrete or water or light, What happens with that? What happens when it becomes spaghetti, or again, but you can't cook it, because if you cook it, you lose the letters. It's kind of nice. It's not meant to be spaghetti, but the spaghetti is so exciting. It can also be jewelry. Anyway, so you when you collaborate, you open up all sorts of possibilities, and some of it is useful and some of it is not. And what is more important is to put these issues out on the table and to kind of create a network. We're sitting here, we're very lucky to be all together. But for me, most people I actually meet them on my website first. It sounds like a dating service. It's not. It's a design dating service. I meet their brains, I meet their work, I like them, and then I meet them in person, I like them even more. I'm not always fortunate to do that, but this is an image of some of the people that I know and I would like to know someday. And so, I want to end with a positive thing, saying, small design actions can have big consequences. And we are swarmed with innovation, creativity, but we're lacking meaning. And meaning is created by putting value to ideas, documenting them, giving them the value they deserve, creating books, creating resources. Everybody suffers. I'm sure the presentation before me were talking about the fact that they wanted to do research, but there was no documentation, or even the people that actually own the work are not documenting it. So this is, building knowledge is very important for continuity, because otherwise we're constantly reinventing the wheel. So with this, I'm going to, with the film, actually, we did the documentation of this project, and there were just a few things said in this that kind of sum up what I said and make a nice ending. The film is half an hour, but I'm not going to make you watch half an hour, no worries. So let's hope it works. I was going to end with something clever, but I can't remember what it was. So I'm glad you can still laugh. I think I really can't remember. So maybe I'll just take a question. If I remember, it will come out later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.